So, when I was a kid, about 10 or 11, we had a large family. A lot of kids, not a lot of money. And we didn't do exciting things that often, but we had once a trip to Great Adventures amusement park, at one of the Six Flags. And we were so excited. I think months before already we were talking about this. And my father took us, the beat up station wagons, the ones with the panels, And the first attraction that I went to in Great Adventures was the Fun House. I hated it. It was dark. There was like these narrow passageways. And every so often, you couldn't tell where you were going. The floor underneath was like a little bit unsteady. And every time you turned a corner, this apparition kind of thing would pop out and jump out at you. And I was just like really miserable there. And I'm going through this unfun house. And I'm thinking, it's not fun. I don't like it. I came out and I'm complaining about it. And I couldn't understand. I remember complaining to my father and saying, I don't understand that people pay money and they think this is enjoyable. Then I got a little older and I understood what the thrill is of the unfun house. The thrill is that we know that even while we're going through this very scary kind of shaky floor and it's dark and these things are popping out, we know that there is some planner, some engineer, somebody who has money, who has paid a lot of money and who has some expertise here, made sure that we're going to go through that and we're not going to get hurt. It's kind of like the thrill that people have, those rides that dash down towards the ground at a few hundred miles an hour. Why is it fun? It's fun because they know they can enjoy the thrill of falling. They're not going to get hurt. There's a master planner. Somebody made sure that even though it seems pretty scary at times, going to be okay. Here we are. Life feels sometimes like an unfun house. And you may be wondering, what do you mean it's going to be okay? How is it okay? How is it okay? There's a list of hostages in front of us. We all know people there, 7 million of them. How is it okay? And people are asking also, how can a God who loves his people, a loving God, a good God, how can a God do something like this? How can a God allow this kind of pain, this kind of horrific nightmare to be taking place now? There was an Israeli who was non-observant and didn't have much background. But one year on Yom Kippur, he happened to be in Crown Heights, in the Chabad, headquarters of Chabad. And he was with a relative, and it was Yom Kippur. So his relative said, come to shul, come with me. So he came, they handed him a machzor, and he's reading the machzor. And he gets to the story. On Yom Kippur, we as part of our davening in the afternoon, we say the story of the 10 martyrs. It's 10 very, very great sages. Is this too tinny? Am I okay? No? Okay. 10 sages, great men, who weren't just killed by the Romans, they were brutally tortured. And there's a little bit of dialogue there. One of them went up to speak to God before to find out. And in that prayer, it also says that the angels, not people, the angels, turned to God and said, this is Torah and this is the reward? How could you do this? And God said, kind of like when the kids were acting up in the back of the car, you say, one more word out of you and I'll leave you by the side. Or God said to the angels, really, one more sound out of you, and I'm going to turn the whole world over. I'm going to make it back to the chaos that it was before, back to the water that it was before. So this man is reading this, and he says, I don't understand. First of all, how terrible a God allowed this to happen. And then as soon as you question him, he says, that's it, I'm going to threaten, I'm going to destroy you. So they saw that he was very upset, so they called over one of the older Hasidim. His name was Reb Zusha Partizan. Reb Zusha said to him, I'll tell you a story. There was once a tailor, and the tailor was given a very important job by the king. The king's daughter was getting married, and the king had a very valuable piece of fabric, gem-studded piece of fabric, and he wanted this magnificent garment. So he asked the Jewish tailor to make him the garment, and the tailor made the garment, and it came out exquisite, and the king was so happy, and as goes many stories in our history, the other advisors were jealous of the attention that the successful Jewish tailor had, so they badmouthed him to the king, and they said, he didn't give you back any remnants. When somebody makes a pattern, you cut it out. There's bits left over, and this fabric is so expensive, he's stealing from you. So the king called over the tailor and said, where's the remnants? And the tailor said, there are none. That's impossible. Tailor's thrown into jail. You know how things can turn into prison, sentenced to death. There's always you can get a last request before death. When it came time for this tailor to have his last request, he said, please bring me this garment, bring me my table, bring me my tools. And he takes the garment and he opens up every seam and he lays it out. And it fits exactly to the original piece of fabric that there was. And this is what God is saying. This is what Hashem is saying to the angels. The only way that you can understand how this belongs to a bigger plan. Why do souls suffer? Why do bodies suffer? Why is it so hard? The only way that I can make it clear to you is not with the world as it is now, not with the garment in its regular shape, because this is a world of concealment. In order for you to see it and understand it, I have to put the world back to what it was before there was this world here. I have to really put it back to the chaos of pre-creation, or to the days of Mashiach, which we're getting to. One of the things, though, I thought a lot about it as I got older, about walking through a scary, dark house and these things popping out. And I realized, as I got older, I always assumed that when really, really scary stuff happens, when we're unsteady or in pain or sad, we have to endure. We're Jews, we survive, we push forward. I didn't realize until I was much older that we have another option. We're walking through the darkness, we can bring some light. And shining some light, I realize now as an adult that those apparitions were probably just like threads of who knows what sewn together, shining some light on the evil. Not only can we, but we must. So in the context of that, I'm going to tell you my story. I've told it before here, so some of you have heard it, but so we'll do the shorter version. But my husband and I married 37 years now, and, children, Baruch Hashem. We had 8 children. 4 of them were born with a really unusual mitochondrial disorder. They were born missing the enzyme that turns food into energy. And we didn't know this until most of our kids were born, because we had healthy children and then we had a child with a problem, but the doctors had never seen anything like it and they thought it was a fluke, and then it happened again and they still weren't sure. So by the time we kind of knew what was happening, we had 4 healthy children and 4 of our children who we always called the babies, because they were born with this mitochondrial disorder, and it's a fatal disorder. They didn't survive infancy. They lived for months, and we tried very hard. So I always looked at my children as divided into 2. The 4 healthy and then the babies, the ones who died. But it was very, very important to me and to my husband that we not be this family that people look at and say, there isn't a good English word for it, but like in Yiddish we say nebach, like poor, unfortunate, I guess you could say. This was over a period of 10 years that we were very busy with children in the hospital and children dying. But I didn't want people to look at us and say, oh, them, they have such a sick child, or, oh, them, half their kids died. So we worked at it. We really worked at it. And our kids now, the healthy ones, they're adults, they don't look at their childhood like that. So, they talk about a happy childhood. Our kids grew up fairly stable, nice people. We have a son and 3 daughters. And our son, Yossi, when he was 23 years old, he got involved in shidduchim. He was dating. And by then, our 2 girls were married, so it was just Yossi and our teenage daughter at home. And Yossi was around this time of year. Yossi was very busy with a shidduch. A shidduch had come up that was really, really perfect. And the plan was that Simchas Torah, and I know that now when we think of Simchas Torah, there's a very, very heavy, hard feeling of Simchas Torah. But Simchas Torah is a really joyous holiday. So this was Simchas Torah 13 years ago. And the plan was that right after the holiday was over, Yossi was going to fly to New York. Things were moving along. Everybody was very excited. My husband is a male. He travels frequently. And so he had a bris in an area that was a little bit far. So he drove there before the holiday. He did the bris in the morning. Simchas Torah by us, actually, here it's a 2-day. So it was the day before Simchas Torah, but it's the holiday of Simchas Torah. So he drove there before. He was going to do the bris in the morning and walk back. So the first night of the holiday, they dance in the shuls, and it's very exciting. Take out the Torahs, dance with the Torahs. I was home with Yossi, who was 23, and with our teenage daughter. And my husband wasn't there till he would be there in the morning. So we went to shul, and there's dancing. And Yossi, because he's in the middle of dating, and he was kind of like he's a nerdy kind of a kid. He was very learned and didn't quite always know, a little goofy, but serious when it came to learning. Didn't always know how to handle himself. So I was watching him dance, and for every step that everyone was taking, he was taking 2, because he was anxious and excited, and it was, he was dating, so it was exciting for him, and he was like a little bit on air, and I'm watching him dance, and finally at about midnight, I'd had enough, so I went to get Yossi, tell him it's time to come home, and Yossi comes up to me, and his face is a little bit red, and his eyes are very bright. My husband doesn't drink. Yossi never drank. I didn't know really what I was looking at. But he loved to say things with very funny expressions. He was one of those kids. He was always a kidder. So I said to him, it's time to go home. He says, I don't want to go home. I'm having happy juice. So I said, okay, but how are you going to get home? It's late. We live about 15 minutes from the shul. It's a walk and it's late already. So his friend comes up behind him. His friend looked like he had even more happy juice than Yossi. And he throws his arm around Yossi and he says to me, don't worry, Mrs. Kreiman, I'll bring him home. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea to leave one drunkard in charge of the other drunkard, but I did. I left them there like that. I went home. But it was a little after 1 a.m. already. Yossi still hadn't come home. I got nervous. I said, no, we have to go back to the shul and get him. So me and my daughter, we walked all the way back to the shul. And by now, everything is over. The dancing is done. And there's just like a few slumped dark forms, from the back. They all look the same, a bunch of black hats and jackets slumped over in a table in the back. And I'm going and I'm looking, I got to find my kid. And finally I find him. I'm tapping, Yossi, Yossi, Yossi. He's a little bit far gone, at this point. And I get him to stand up and I get him to come outside. Now the air in LA, you could say whatever you want about LA, but the weather is nice. The air was very crisp and, fresh. By now it was very, very late. It was already like early morning by the time everything got moving. So Yossi got he was still pretty drunk, but he got a second wind. And he starts running up and down the sidewalk, flapping his arms like an airplane and screaming, flight number, whatever, from Los Angeles to New York, screaming the name of the girl he's dating. We're Hasidic. We don't do that. But he is flying an airplane and screaming the name of the girl. Then he starts somersaulting on the sidewalk. Now, we had bought him a whole dating wardrobe, new hat, new suit, new shoes. And he's somersaulting on the sidewalk. I have to go home. My husband's not with me. I'm getting a little frustrated. So I said to him, Yossi, you're impossible. So he gets up, he looks at me, he says, I'm not impossible. I'm possible. I'm possible. And I guess he liked the way that sounded. The rest of the way home, I'm walking. He's dancing backwards in front of me. I'm possible. I'm possible. Eventually, we got him home, got him into bed. The next day was still the holiday. He went to shul in his weekday suit and his old hat and his Crocs. But after the holiday, Yossi flew to New York, and a few weeks later, he got engaged. And we started to prepare for a wedding. It was a Friday afternoon, a short time after that. Yossi had been in the summer, because, at Chabad, we go everywhere. Yossi was a learning director. His job was to teach and to oversee the learning in Costa Rica. And as the learning director, he got to go on the trips. And one of the trips that they took the boys on was scuba diving. Yossi was not athletic in that way. He really was a nerdy kid, but he loved nature. And he went on that trip, and he came home, and he couldn't stop talking about it. And so he was going for his diving certification. It was a Friday afternoon. My husband called me. The police had called him. Something had gone wrong with the equipment. They pulled Yossi from the water. Yossi's in the hospital. And so we got into the car to go to him. And the whole way to the hospital, I am saying the same thing again and again and again. I'm telling it to God. I'm telling it to myself. You know how when something really big happens, so you say, okay, so this is my big thing in life. I did it already. I had lost half my kids. And it wasn't small. I tell the story quickly, but it was 10 years with a lot of struggle. And I was telling God again and again and again, this is not the babies. This is Yossi. Reminding him and telling it to myself. I have the babies. They were sick. I have Yossi, he's part of the healthy children. The babies died. The healthy children lived. This is not the babies. This is Yossi. He's getting married. This is not the babies. This is Yossi. He's getting married. But when we got to the hospital, they asked us to come in a small room, which is never a good thing. And they said, we did everything we could, and we're so sorry. And that was it. Just like that, we lost Yossi. And we had to go home. It was almost Shabbos. We had no choice. That feeling of, you must go home, because there was nothing we can do. Every difficulty that we have asks something of us. Sometimes we have to do things, but sometimes we just have to be. We have to endure. We went home. We had Shabbos. We buried Yossi that Sunday. It was exactly 6 weeks to the day he was supposed to get married. In my book, I call it the almost wedding day, because it was his wedding day, but there was no wedding. And then starts Shiva. You know how Shiva is. Everybody comes and talks. And I was in such a state that I wasn't taking in a whole lot. I was very not ungracious. And the whole time through Shiva, I'm having one thought. And I'm thinking, soon everyone's going to go back. They go back to their own homes. And it's very sad, but the world continues. But I won't be able to. And it wasn't just because Yossi and I were very close, which we were. We had a very, very good relationship. But I had this very strong sense that there's only so much that a heart can take. And I really felt it, not even from a dramatic point, just a deep sense of, really from the time I was a child, I'd been struggling with certain things. It wasn't like I grew up easy. And then I'd lost the babies. And this was the good part. And I was very, very sure that I can't do any more broken. And I didn't know how, but I really sensed this, that there's not going to be a going on from this. The last day of Shiva was really already Friday afternoon. Shiva was pretty much over. There was just a few women still sitting outside. We were on a patio, and I was thinking, and my thoughts were so dark, I actually scared myself. And I knew sometimes you have to stop thinking. So I turned to the woman next to me. Her name is Judy Weingart. She's a professional singer. And I said, Judy, sing something. She looked at me like I'm insane. I mean, we don't sing at Shiva. And I said to her, I need to stop thinking. It was so dark what I was thinking. And I said, I need to hear a song. I need to not think, just sing. So she got all flustered. What should I sing? What should I sing? So she turned to the woman next to her, former student of mine, Rivka, and she said, what should I sing? So Rivka just pulled out a song. How many songs are there in the world? I don't know, million, billion, trillion. Of all the songs in the world, here's the song that Judy sang to me in the last minutes of Shiva. It's possible. It's possible. Everything is possible. Just keep your mind upon your goal and turn to God with all your soul. It's possible. It's possible. And I saw Yossi dancing in the night. I'm possible. I'm possible. And with those words, we did get up from that low chair of Shiva. Truth, it's not always possible. Sometimes it's just too hard. But Yossi didn't say it's possible. Yossi said, I'm possible. And that's a very big difference. We face things that are not possible. When we really think about some of the things that are going on in this world, or when we really think about the numbers, little tiny Jewish nation, little tiny Jewish country, not possible. It's not possible to endure this. It's not possible to bear it. Forget about explain it. But Yossi said, I'm possible. I'm possible. All of us. What are we? We're bodies and souls. That's an impossible fusion. That's matter and spirit. How do they come together? What makes a human being? We have our body, but we have within us a breath of Hashem, the actual breath of Hashem. We have within us a godly part that is really within us a part of infinity. And when we can tap in, when we are not looking at the world from this very limited physical way, because that is impossible. It just really is. If we can go soul level and tap into soul, tap into the part within each of us, the I'm possible part, the godly part, we can do anything as individuals, as a nation. The problem is that sometimes we hear these concepts, and they're beautiful concepts, but they're far from us. Soul and possible, it sounds very nice, but in my real day-to-day, as a nation, again, because right now we're really facing a lot as a nation, but even individually, battling our own vulnerabilities within our personalities or the stuff that happens to us. And there's this godly concept, but how do we grasp it? Why does it have to be so distant from us? So one of the students of the holy Baal Shem Tov, and these were very, very holy, great men, one of the students complained to the Baal Shem Tov, and he said, I don't feel God is close to me. And sometimes I feel it a little bit, and then it goes away. I can't feel it anymore. So the Baal Shem Tov said, and he was complaining, why can't God be more real? You want us to serve God? Why can't it be to feel more accessible, to feel more real, and less of an abstract idea that's in a book or in a class? So the Baal Shem Tov said, think about the way that a parent teaches a child how to walk. So the parent stands the child up, and the child is getting ready to take a step, and the parent steps back. The child takes a step, and the parent steps back. Again, child takes a step, parent is stepping away, and the Baal Shem Tov asked, why? Why would a parent step away from a child? And the Baal Shem Tov explained, because the child and the parent want two different things. The child wants, pick me up, hold me, carry me, right? Take care of me, make it all good, you take care of me, you hold me. But the parent wants the child to know that he knows how to walk. The parent wants the child to know that he knows how to walk. So the parent steps away. Look at us. Look at us. Here we are. Even as a nation, I mean, think about it, the Egyptians have tried to destroy us, and the Babylonians and the Greeks and the Romans, right? What have we been through? Crusades and Cossacks and Inquisitions and pogroms and Holocausts, and even now, I mean, the rockets and stabbings and bombs, and that's without even going into now. We have gotten up. We have done great things. We do it all the time. We are still a light to the nations. We know how to walk. And part of it is that we understand it's not our job, even though it's human nature maybe a little bit to be screaming this, it's not our job to figure out why. Because we said we can't. We'd have to dismantle the world for that. This is a world of concealment. We don't get to even ask why. Our job is to ask, how do we do this? What are you asking of me? But before we get to that, I want to go to a very real and maybe human reaction. And maybe it was only me, so I'll talk about mine. My reaction when difficult things happen, my very first reaction always is to say, no, I don't want this. I don't want to be brave or strong or spiritual. I don't want to be engaged in this. When one of my babies was in the hospital, I went to be with her. She was very, very sick. At that point, she was really dying already. I went to be with her. But before I went up to her room, I went to the bathroom in the lobby. And the bathroom, there was a sign. You have them in many bathrooms. And it says, baby changing station. I looked at that baby changing station and I said, that's what I need. And I started to cry like a maniac in the bathroom by the baby changing station, crying to God. And I'm saying, Hashem, I want to change my baby. I want to change my baby for a baby that works. I don't want the sick baby. And I'm crying at the baby changing station. I want to change my baby. And I know it's absurd, but I'm crying and crying. But I meant it. I don't want this sick child. But eventually, you got to pull it together. Washed my face, went upstairs. My baby at that point was intubated, so it was a little complicated to hold her. It needed a whole staff, to move her over. And I had to scrub up for her. She was very, very, very fragile. But eventually I'm holding her. And she was a few months old at this point. And my babies grew at normal rates. They looked like normal children. Even prettier, I think. So she had chubby cheeks. Her hair was starting to grow. And I'm looking at this beautiful baby. And I put my finger, you know how tiny babies, you put your finger in, and she wasn't able to do much, but she wrapped her fingers. And I had this thought. It's going to sound ridiculous because it's so simple, but sometimes the simplest things are the most profound. We don't get to change the baby. Imagine a kid is acting out in school and the parent says, that kid is too difficult, give me another one. We understand. We don't get to change the baby, but I'll tell you how I understood it. But first I want to give you the backdrop. I was not very spiritual and holy and walking on air. I was, when my babies were sick, kind of hard to live with. I was very anxious every time the phone rang because I had sick kids and we weren't able to be there all the time because we had young kids at home. So every time the phone rang, we jumped. I was angry. Why is it happening? Why is it happening again? I was bitter. I was jealous. Looked at other women having babies and thought, look how nice for them. They take home a healthy baby, My baby can barely breathe. So I was going through all that. But I want to talk about a moment that was transcendent. There was a moment, so it wasn't like I was high on this spiritual ride all the time. I was also pretty young. I was in my early 20s when I had the first sick child, so it wasn't like I had all that experience at that point. But I want to talk about a wow moment. That day, after I wanted to change the baby at the baby changing station, I'm holding this baby, and I had a thought, and I recognized something. No mistakes. She's not, even though we can explain it medically, she's not a mistake. This is a soul in a body on a journey for however long it's meant to be. And me and my husband, we're the ones chosen to escort this child through. And I don't know why. We don't understand why some souls have to suffer. And I know the concept of baby suffering is extremely, extremely painful at this point because nobody can understand. I mean, we understand maybe at some level soldiers, but babies? So it's very, very hard to understand it. But I don't know. I was thinking with my own baby, I didn't understand why this child is suffering. But I'll tell you what I learned from it. At that moment, I had a transcendent moment, a recognition that there's something bigger here. That this baby, I have to show up at the hospital, and I have to hold her so that the staff knows that it's a hospital, that it's a baby that's important. And because it's good for her in this moment to feel my touch, to hear my voice, she's never going to say thank you. She's never going to grow up, never going to call me mommy. I'm not going to get anything back. I got to feel what it's like to give with no expectation of anything in return. Like really unconditional love, but in a very, very positive way. It felt good. It felt important. And I recognized that I'm the kind of person, I'm always making like this calculation. Is this worth it? Is that worth it? Always like trying to figure things out. And here I was in a hospital, and all I had with this child was this moment. She was dying. I mean, we knew she was dying. We could see. And it wasn't our first time. But at this moment, I had a sense that sometimes when there's no point or bigger picture or any grand anything that's going to come from it, there is such tremendous power in souls connecting in the moment. Like sometimes we wonder, is it worth it? Like I'm just never going to see this person again. Any kind of small thing. If we can touch soul to soul, a moment of giving, I think it can last forever. I had that very strong sense, something bigger than me. Because that's really what we're here for. Every one of us, every single person in this world, however long they live, is here because there's a job only they can do. Only each individual can do that particular job from the time the world was created, that's waiting for them. That's each of us. It's every human being, every Jew. And that's what we're here for. We're here to do the work. Whatever that work is, we're here to do the work. So what does the work look like? Well, let me tell you. So my Yossi, after he drowned, I went through a very bad time, like trauma, where every time I would close my eyes, I would see him like in black water, struggling to breathe and not knowing what to do. It wasn't accurate. He died in beautiful blue water on a very sunny day, and he did know how to swim. He was a lifeguard, actually. But that was the image. I had like this, I was stuck in this cycle of horror, which sometimes can happen to us. It was in my own head, but sometimes when we try to imagine the reality of something, it's not necessarily a healthy thing to do. And I wasn't functioning from it because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything because all I could see, every time I closed my eyes, I couldn't remember my smiley, happy, bright kid. I was seeing him in black, struggling to breathe. So somebody suggested a trauma therapy, and I went. It's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I went, and I sat with a therapist, and we're talking a little bit. And then she says to me, count backwards from 20. And I'm thinking, hocus pocus, count backwards from 20, what is this, And then she says, follow my fingers, and she's making figure eight. And I'm thinking, for this, it's $250, But you're there, you do it. I'm following her fingers, I'm counting backwards from 20, and then she takes out this rod, and she sets up this rod with lights, and she says, don't turn your head, just move your eyes and follow the lights. And I'm following the lights, and I'm seeing Yossi in my head. I'm seeing him as a little boy by his bike. I'm seeing him, he learned, he never could learn from just one book. Yossi had to have a pile of books. He loved research. So he had a pile of books. He loved languages. He was always learning. And I'm seeing the essence, who he was. And I realized the brilliance of it afterwards. The counting backwards from 20 and the figure eights, it kind of clears your head from distractions. We get in our own way. When we tell ourselves things that are like self-defeating, when we put ourselves down, when we say how we're not as good as this one or as good as that one, or we get in our own way. When we ask the wrong questions, which is why, as opposed to what is being asked of me, we get into this cycle. And if we want to see the light, because when I saw the light, I was able to reconnect with my son. When we need to see the light, the first thing we need to do is get rid of the distractions. It's really all about light. Before there was this world, there was only light. That's what it says. If you learn Hasidus, if you learn just the esoteric teachings of what was, there was only light, only revelation, only godliness. God says he desired a world in which there's struggle and concealment and evil. So in order to have that world, you can't have the light, because the light doesn't let any of that exist. So God had to roll back the light. We say it in the prayers in Ma'ariv and Shabbos. We say, Gailul Or. God rolled away the light, and then we have this world with all the concealments, with all the difficulties. What's our job? Our job is to bring back the light. What were the first words that God ever said? Yehi, somebody whispered it. Let there be light, or let it be light. That's what it is. How do we do it? Let's make it practical instead of just some concept where we just watch a video on literally lighting candles. But it's more than that. That's, of course, a very important way to actually bring physical and spiritual light, is to light a candle, any mitzvah that we do. But this is ours. It's our beautiful mitzvah. What I've seen is that we do this. We have choices every moment of the day. From the moment we wake up, I have it every morning. I wake up in the morning and I can give you immediately a reason why today I am too busy, or too tired, or too jet-lagged, or too distracted, or too sad to pray. I cannot daven today. And then immediately have to fight that. Or if somebody wants something from me, I can immediately revert to, why should I do that for them? Every moment of our day, really, we're making choices. I could spend a moment with this, I could spend a moment with that. We are choosing to bring light. We're doing it with big and small choices all the time. All the time. Because really what's happening now, and I don't know another time in my lifetime that it's been like this, is we've all been called up to serve. We're all foot soldiers. I can't drive a tank. I can't work for the IDF. But I can say a prayer and beg God to keep them safe. I can do mine. I can give money. I can do my thing. And the wonderful thing about light, you can have a very dark room. All you need is a little light, and then it's not a dark room anymore. A very small bit of light, and we know now how much darkness there is. There is so much darkness, not only in Israel, but in every American city pretty much, in Europe, and the world. We're fighting darkness so much. It's a real fight, and we've all been drafted, like it or not. We are the foot soldiers, and every moment we have a choice. We really, really do. It comes down to the small things. This is a war, a spiritual war that's going to be fought by all of us, moment by moment, whether we like it or not. And it's a war, if you look at it. I don't remember a time like this before where evil is so clearly in the front all over the world. I mean, we talk about the Holocaust, they had that too. But here, we're all part of the fight now. I'm a child of a survivor and a grandchild of survivors. My father was a child survivor and my grandparents are survivors. So I know, like, we grew up with this. And here we are again, but in a different way, because we're in the fight now. And we have it so clear in front of us. It's a fight of good versus bad and an opportunity to bring light, bring light, bring light every moment. Sometimes, though, when we're talking about bringing light and it's so nice, sometimes, again, only talking about myself and my own struggles here for a moment, I run into this thing where I say, that's all very nice, bring light, very good, do good for other people. It's very good. But it's not fair. I'm in too much pain. I'm too hurt. I'm too handicapped by whatever it is that we have so many struggles. So in my book, I call it, Even Though. Here's how it works. On the day that we buried our last baby, what happened was that when we had our first few children that were sick, we didn't know what we were dealing with. But by the time we already were into it enough, we knew, and this is before we had our last baby, we knew that my husband and I, we found out finally, it took 10 years, but we found out finally what the issue was. And we found out that we have something that's called autosomal recessive. And what it is that every single pregnancy, we have 25% chance for a sick child, 75% chance for a healthy child. It's pretty good odds. Pretty good odds. But the problem was, if a child is sick, he or she, 2 boys, 2 girls, they weren't 25% sick. They were 100% sick. So every pregnancy is a risk. We were young, really young. So we asked the doctors and the therapists and the rabbis, should we have more children? They all said the same thing. 1 more. Because you have good odds. Have 1 more, but you have to promise it'll be your last one. So we had the last baby. And I was so sure that the last baby would be healthy. Last baby wasn't healthy. And on the day that we buried the last baby, and I remember standing by his grave and thinking, here we are, burying a baby for the 4th time, but also burying all the hopes, the children we could never have. Now, the children you can never have are always perfect, right? But I didn't know how to give shape to that kind of a loss. And now I'm older, I talk about it, but at that point I didn't talk about it. I was still young and didn't know how to address it. But I felt this sense of so much is lost. So on that day, it was the day we buried him. So, it was a day where I might have had permission a little bit to be a little bit off my game, we can say. I was on my patio with my 4 kids and my very good friend, Fradel. She's Israeli. I never used to say her name, but then my book came out and I wrote her name in it, and she allowed. So my friend Fradel, my Israeli friend, I was on the porch and I was talking. We had just come back from burying the baby. And I was saying that I had read that there's an angel in heaven. His name is Metatron. And he learns every day. He has a special little yeshiva up there for the babies and the children who came through this world and never sinned. The souls that didn't even interact with this world, that came into this world and left it pure. There's a special yeshiva, the angel Metatron learns with them. That was fine, but then I started to get aggravated. And my kids, they're little kids at that point, they're looking at me, and I'm going off on one of my things, and I'm saying, do you think the angel Metatron takes attendance? Every day he says, Kreiman, Kreiman, Kreiman. And my kids are like freaking out a little bit. And then I say, and today the angel Metatron says, oh, look, a 4th Kreiman baby. And here's how the angel Metatron takes attendance today. Kreiman, 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 Kreiman. And my friend Fradel, with her Israeli accent, says, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. And we froze. And then we laughed. Because my kids, we knew we don't say shut up in my house. Even now, nobody says shut up. But shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up 4 times in Israeli accent is allowed. You know why? Because here's what it means. It means even though your heart is broken, and even though you lost this baby and the other babies and all the babies you can have, and you're the biggest nebuch in the world, even though nobody would fault you, today especially, it's a day of the funeral, even though you may say, I have permission, who can blame me, to be sad, angry, obnoxious, bitter, even though you may have every right in the world, you have 4 healthy children who need you, and if you lose it, you will add to their trauma. So even though you may feel that you have a right, you don't get to do whatever you want just because you're in pain. because other people need you and you need you. So shut up. And it really, really worked. It taught me something. Here we are now. I don't know anybody right now who's not in deep pain and kind of anxious, scared, sad, angry, worried, drained. We've been fighting for a long time for our existence. It's all there. But we have to step up because our brothers and sisters in Israel need us. Our families need us. We need us. We need ourselves. We need to come to it. And it's not just enough to do good things. How we do it is really, really important. My husband, great guy. I don't like when he comes in the kitchen. One time, after Yossi died, he came into the kitchen. I was making eggplant for Shabbos, and he says to me, "Why are you using so much salt?" This is why I don't like him in the kitchen. So I said to him, "That's how my mother does it, and don't worry, I'll rinse it off." But he said, "Why are you using so much salt?" So I said, "Because when you salt the eggplant, it takes away bitterness. If you salt it before you cook it, it takes away the bitterness." Oh, I'm busy, and then I feel white flakes coming down over my head and shoulders. And I turn around, my husband is holding the salt shaker, shaking, and he says to me, to take away the bitterness. We can't come at our Judaism, and I realize he's suffering, but we can't come at our Judaism bitter, defeated, angry. Okay, fine, God, here's your candle. No, we can't. Because our soldiers who are at war, they need to fight this war with confidence, with hope, with pride, with a strong belief, because it's an impossible war, if you just look at the numbers, but it doesn't matter. They have to go with such a joy, we will break every barrier. They need that joy. We're in this war. We all need to have such joy in our Judaism right now. Such joy. How? So let me tell you how. The night before Yossi died, Thursday night, I was cooking. He was in the kitchen, supposedly helping me, but he was eating, I was cooking, and we were talking. And Yossi was telling me, he was such a scholarly kind of a kid. He only knew how to cook, I think, 3 things. And he was telling me he was nervous. He says, I have to set up my apartment in New York, and I don't know, there's all these things here. I don't know what they are. He's getting nervous about the whole domestic part of it. And I said to him, don't worry. I had a ticket to New York, and I think it was 2 weeks after that. I was supposed to go to New York. I said, I'm going to take your fiancé shopping. It's so much fun to set up an apartment. You're like, it'll be fine. Don't worry. So he kind of relaxed, and he said to me, Yossi's mode was always when he was relaxed, a joke. And he said to me, oh, you know what? You got all this great stuff right here. Why don't I just take from here? So I was joking back, and I said, sure, just tell me what you want to take. And then I got busy. I was busy cooking. I wasn't really paying attention to him. He was busy. Then I look up. Yossi had taken yellow Post-it notes. A lot of yellow Post-it notes. He had written on every one his name and his fiance's name. Everywhere, my fridge, my stove, my counter, every kitchen chair, every appliance, every drawer, my entire kitchen table. Everything big and small in the kitchen is covered in yellow Post-it notes with his name and her name. And he says to me, here, I marked what we're taking. And I'm laughing with him. We're looking around the kitchen. And then just because we happen to look around the kitchen and I see his name with her name. So I said to him, it was just like in the conversation, I said, Yossi, isn't it amazing that someone who you didn't know for most of your life is soon going to be the most important person in the world to you? And he said, you're the most important person in the world to me, Mommy. And I said, Yossi, you're getting married. If your mother is the most important person in the world to you, maybe we have a little problem. But Yossi was 23. When you're 23, you know everything. He says, no, don't worry. My marriage, that's another story. But right now in this kitchen, you're the most important person in the world to me. He died the next day. But I want to tell you about the rest of the conversation. I want to tell you what happened after that. Yossi told me, he became serious, and he told me that even after he was married, he wanted to spend all the Jewish holidays with us. And he started telling me how much he loved Yom Tov, all the holidays in our house. And he was sharing some of his memories of it. And when he told me that, I had such a warm, it's 13 years, and I still feel that joy. Because from the time Yossi was 4 until he was 14, we had 6 children. And when you're going through something difficult, the happy times are the hardest. I don't know if we'll ever be able to do a Simchas Torah again. Mashiach is going to come, we'll do it. But it's hard to be happy when your heart is broken. And the problem is, when we're going through a difficult time, and we have people around us who need us, especially with kids who are getting bigger, it doesn't work to say to them, hang on, put your childhood on hold while I process this shock and bitterness and anger and sadness, and then I'll come back and be a mom. It doesn't work like that. While I was going through these 10 years with 6 children, I had healthy children at home who were getting bigger. And we had holidays. And it was very hard. So what I did was, I went all the way the other extreme. I invited a lot of people, and I went crazy on the food. Pesachs at my house were huge, and I would have Purim parties that were like 40, 50 people. I was just generating joy, working hard. But I always worried that somehow, even with all my efforts, my kids would somehow, they had a sad mom. I mean, I was sad for a lot of the time. And I worried it would affect them. And here was my son as an adult, and I hadn't asked him. And that was already the serious conversation, telling me how much he loved the holidays. And it was such a beautiful validation. He was saying thank you. As it was the first time it occurred to him as an older, as a young adult to acknowledge, you did something for me that wasn't easy for you, and I loved it, and thank you. On a very basic level, you want joy? Acknowledge the good in your life. You want real joy to someone else who's done something for you. It's very basic and very simple, but it has to be said. There was a couple that went to a marriage counselor. The wife complained. She said, he never says he loves me. The counselor looked at the husband and said, is that true? And he said, look, 30 years ago, I told her I love her. If anything changes, I'll let you know. No, it has to be said. That's step one of joy. But let's go deeper. Joy. When my kids were little, we went on a family trip. And at the end of the trip, as we were getting ready to leave, we passed a store that sold very unusual T-shirts. And my little daughter decided she must have one of those T-shirts. And we decided, no, you don't need this T-shirt. And everybody get in the van. Trip is over. We're going home. The whole way home, 2 hours. She was saying, if we just turn the van around and go back and buy the T-shirt, she promises she will be happy for the rest of her life. She promises she'll never ask for anything again if we just go back and get that T-shirt. But sometimes we do that with joy. And we don't do it with things that are extra. We do it with real things. We say, God, if you help me that I shouldn't be lonely, or I should be healthy, it's real things. Or I need enough money that I don't have to worry, or whatever it is. Safety, right now I think safety is big on our heads. If you give me this, the sense of this, or this thing that I need, then I could be happy. But if I don't have it, what happens if I don't have what I want right now? How do I find joy when I don't have what I want? When somebody's missing from my life that I know I can't get back? Or the situation right now is not what I want. And yet we're told we have to have joy. We can't have this war defeated like victims. That's exactly what they want. That's what terrorism is. Make you so scared you can't enjoy your life. We cannot have that. We must have joy. And yet we don't really have what we want. How do we get to joy, to real simcha, if we don't have what we want? So Avram Joshua Heschel writes that when a Jew is sad, he cries. When he's sadder still, he is silent. But when he's saddest of all, he sings. When he's saddest of all, he sings. Because singing is a language of the soul. You ever walk into a place and there's music and immediately you're responding? Or a deep meditative time melody and it makes you it pulls you in. Here's how it works. When a Jew is most sad, he sings. Because singing is a language of the soul. When you take it to its essence, joy and sadness, at their essence, they come from the same place. The absolute greatest sadness that a person can feel, the most devastating sadness, is the feeling of a wasted life. It's a feeling that we lived and we had experiences and we were given gifts and opportunities, and we didn't leave the world any better than when we came in. We didn't work on ourselves. We didn't do anything with it. That waste of all that potential, it's a very, very deep sadness. It's a sadness of the soul. Conversely, the greatest joy that a person can feel has nothing to do with circumstances. The greatest joy a person can feel is the feeling that we were put into this world, a soul and a body, given situations, some of them wonderful, some of them harder, given certain challenges, sometimes within our own personalities and tendencies and things that happen to us, again, as individuals and as a nation. And the greatest joy we can have is saying we took that and we made the world better. We were hurting, we were scared, we shone light. We did good. And I'm going to end with this. We'll almost end with this. How do we do it? We do it by truth. Truth is truth, always truth. When my kids were little, we would go to this park, and my husband would sit and learn, and my girls would ride bikes around him, and Yossi would go rollerblading. That was his thing. And because I wanted to keep an eye on him, I would go rollerblading behind him. I'm terrible on blades. So he would be whizzing around, and I would be wobbling along behind him. We got by. After he died, I was by the beach, and my EMDR therapist was near the water, and I had this feeling, I want to go back and do the way I used to go with Yossi, because we'd go by the path, by the water. I want to go back and do it, even though it's been many years since I'd done it. So I went to the beach with my rollerblades and my helmet, parked my car, put on my blades, and put on the helmet, Helmet doesn't fit. I can't get it to trying, and it doesn't work. So I dumped the helmet back in the car, and I went on the path, and I'm really, really shaky on the blades. I'm really not very good, and it's been, I don't know, a lot of years since I've done it. And I'm thinking about Yossi, and as I'm going along, the path suddenly goes up a hill. Now, any dummy will tell you that if you don't really know how to skate well, and you're not wearing a helmet, and you don't know how to stop, the last thing you want to be doing, if you're going to go up a hill, you're also going to have to go down a hill. You don't want to be doing that. But I wasn't thinking, so I went up the hill, and all of a sudden, I am flying. And this happened faster than the time it takes to tell you, but I am flying down that hill, and I'm thinking, you're going to fall, idiot, no helmet, you're going to fall. And as I'm flying down that hill, I noticed at the bottom of the hill, there's a pole. It may have been attached to a sign, but I just noticed the pole. And I thought if I can just aim towards that pole, I'll grab the pole and I won't fall. So I aimed myself, was flying here, careening down towards the pole. I hit that pole so hard that I slammed into it and I fell backwards, hit the back of my head, which I always say explains a few things. The first moment, again, I don't have an English word for it. In Yiddish, we would say azetz. That's the kind of smack that's like so big that you're not the same person after a zetz. Like I don't know, like a real blow. It took me a minute to realize, 1 second, where are we? Still in this world. Okay, this is ground. That's sky. Okay, the sky's still there. Then, what do we do now? I'm on the floor. I'm a survivor. We all are. I said, okay, let's see. Take stock. What used to work? What still works? I used to be able to move my arms. Can I still move my arms? I tried. Still move my arms, okay. Used to be able to move my legs. Can I still move my legs? I tried, yeah. So I can still move my arms. I can still move my legs. So I'm kind of, bruised and battered, but what used to work still works. I can get up. I can keep going. And the whole way back to my car, 2 miles, in my socks. I never skated again, carrying my plates. But I'm thinking, Yossi died, azetz. And we can all relate to that in a certain way now, where we hear something and we know there's no going back to the people we were before. We're just not going to be that. We will come out stronger, better, but we're not what we were the day before October 7th, we're not going to be after. This is a zetz that takes us off our feet and makes us question what's up, what's down, who are we, where's what, what are we going to do now? How do we go on? Truth. What used to work, what still works. I used to believe in God. That there's nothing in this world that's random, not a blade of grass. By the way, that's the saying of the day. We learn something every day. That's the saying of the day on the day that Yossi died. Every year on that day, it's a Hasidic diary of the Rebbe. It's that nothing is by mistake, nothing is an accident. Blade of grass doesn't move without it being part of the plan. God runs everything, and God is good. Do I still believe in God? Still believe in God. I used to believe in soul, that a soul is created before this world, continues to live after this world, that our job in this world is work of the soul. Do I still believe in soul? Still believe in soul. So what used to work still works. Used to believe in God, still believe in God, still believe in soul. So we're bruised and we're battered, right? We can get up. We can keep going. And I am going to end with this. People say to me, oh, it's easy for you. You were born religious, or you're happy, or you're spiritual, or you're strong, so you can do it, I can't do it. But it's not how it works. After Yossi died, I journaled a lot. I didn't know at the time that it would be a book, but I recorded my journal. I recorded my journey. I journaled my journey. I wrote, really, I admitted to a lot. I call it inelegant. It was just one great big mess. Things like at my son's funeral, as they were burying him, one of my daughters saw the crowd and said, Yossi must be loving this attention. And we laughed as we buried him. And that's how crazed with grief we were. And that's when I realized how close joy and sadness are. I wrote how when people asked me how I'm doing during Shiva, I jealously counted how many children they have. I wrote that I was binge eating during the night. I wrote that I had a serious argument with my husband, the first birthday of Yossi without Yossi, where I drove like a dangerous maniac. I admitted to all that. I wrote about the messy process. So if anyone who thinks strong, happy, spiritual, I have a book for you. But I also wrote about the struggle to find who am I now? Because when something terrible happens, we ask ourselves, who am I really? We're all asking, I think we're all asking it now. Who am I in this great big global fight? What's my part? I was asking that. How do I mother a child who's not here, but I know forever I'm going to be his mom? I think we're all asking that. How do we connect and do for hostages who are ripping at our hearts, even though we've never met them? We cannot sleep because we know that they're there. Who am I now, and what do I do about it? How do I relate to other people? How do I relate to a God who I felt abandoned me? And I recorded that journey. And here's what I learned. It was once in an elevator. I had a meeting and I came out. It was night. And I came out of the elevator and my car was in an underground parking lot. And it was dark. And it was night, and I was by myself, and I was scared. I was scared to get the car. So it was light right by the elevator, but the whole parking lot is dark. But I had to get my car. I had no choice. So I started to walk towards my car, and as soon as I started to walk, lights went on, and I realized this is motion generated. And this is how it works. We look at what's going on, and we say, I can't fight this. I don't know how. I'm too small. But even if I'm feeling not so spiritual, I can say one line of a prayer. Even if I'm feeling not so generous, I can give a little bit of money. Even if I'm feeling, what's the point? I can make a blessing with full concentration and say, God, please, you release captives, please. I can do a little bit. I can do a little bit. I can do a little bit. I can smile at someone when I don't feel like it. I can do something that doesn't benefit me for a moment, move out of my own selfishness and preoccupation with whatever it is. I can do a little bit. I could take a step. A light goes on. All of us, we take a step. A light goes on. We take a step, a light goes on. And before you know it, the whole world, it's light. I could if you want. Usually people need a minute to be. If there are questions, I'm happy to take them. Absolutely. Sure. Go for it.
You mentioned early on that you didn't want people to view you as a poor family and feel sorry for you. And I take it from what you said that you were able to, people didn't feel that way about you. You didn't sense those feelings about you, about your family, because you invited a lot of people over and tried to be joyous. Could you comment a little bit about that?
I think it's never that linear. It wasn't like they do or they don't. I think it was an ongoing struggle. Many times when we're going through a hard time and we're insecure, like I think back to when I was in 7th grade. I wish that me now could go to 7th grade, and show that insecure kid a thing or two, We project our own insecurities or our own sadness. Like after Yossi, I had trouble going out and being seen by anyone. I was almost like ashamed that so much bad stuff had happened to me. Like, what kind of person does God think I am that he took away most of my kids? I found that when I can project a sense of okayness, when I can work on my own relationship with God, then other people, they don't care about necessarily what happened. They pick up on the way we feel about ourselves. So I didn't understand that when I was starting out. So I was like, oh, people are going to look at me like it's horror a little bit. I lost most of my children. It's like, for goodness sake, the first rule is keep them alive, right? I was embarrassed in a way that so much bad stuff had happened. And then I worked with my reconnecting to God and understanding that nothing is just a mistake or, that's a bigger plan. And once I was able to project a sense of security with my own story, like people do with handicaps. Many times you see them and you think, well, how does that person continue? Like if I had that handicap, but they learn to make peace with it, to welcome it, to work with it, then everybody else it's not even about them. They automatically fall in line. But that was the process for me. The process was within me. Like I thought it's them. I don't want them to think I'm a nebuch. And part of it was the efforts because it really starts with externals. Like I wrote in my book also that I went to see another woman who had lost her 2 sons and a husband. And I showed up at her door. The first year I was feeling very sorry for myself. I really looked the nebuch. I was wearing like an old skirt. I think I was wearing a t-shirt I'd slept in. I was in New York. And she opens the door. I wrote about it, so I can say it. Her name is Cyril. Cyril died. She's a lovely, elegant woman. And she opens the door, and she looks fantastic, gorgeous. And I'm like, I didn't know what to do with myself. And we talked a little bit, and she said, I don't want to look like this. It starts with the externals. And I bought lipstick that day. It starts with the externals also a little bit. When you make a little bit of an effort, then it helps you from the inside. So it's both sides. The work goes 2 ways, is what I'm trying to say. On one hand, we're constantly reminding ourselves, Hashem loves us. God really loves each of us, and there are no mistakes, and this is soul work, and we will prevail, and we will do good with it, and we'll get through it, and we'll come out, I think I spoke to you before, you said stronger, better, more spiritual, right? But at the same time, even the externals, the fact, look at this room. Everybody here, you showed up, right? Sometimes we wonder, in the big picture, it's going to make a difference? Yeah. Every single light, every single thing we do. So to invite people to do whatever helps us to feel productive again. The work looks different for each of us. So I think it's both. And it's a process, and it didn't happen in a day. Sure, go ahead.
You shared what your grieving looked like for your babies and then for your son. What did your husband's grieving?
It's a great question. We get asked it all the time. So my husband is very different than me and not as expressive. And when I told a story, especially when I write, I have to write only my perspective. So part of the tricky part was, and I think this happens many times when a family's going through a hard time, is one partner can sometimes use up all the air in the room and make it more about themselves. So my husband we fell into our roles a little bit. My husband became the one who continued no matter what, whereas I became the one who was grieving very elaborately. And at a certain point, I realized it was a little bit selfish, because I was the one I was more dominant in it, to the extent that people would meet him, and he also just lost a child, and ask him how I'm doing. So it took a while. I wrote about it. It took a while for me to recognize that even though he's not crying and talking and doing all that, he's grieving too, and he needed to be allowed that. The hard part is that sometimes people grieve very differently, and it's not always a men-women thing. So you have some men that are much more expressive and some women that are not. But it does tend to be in general. It's very, very important when people are grieving, people who are close to us. And everybody says, what should I do? What should I do? And I get asked it a lot because, of my experience with grief. And I always say, you have to see what they need. Some people want to talk. You have to listen. Some people don't want to talk at all. Just sit with them. There's no one way. We're all different. So part of my journey was recognizing that. My children, too. It took me a long time to realize that as much as they missed their brother, their biggest fear was that me and my husband wouldn't come through this. They wanted their parents to be okay and sane, and they were worried that they would lose us, that we would be so overcome that we would not have a connection anymore with them. I didn't realize that in the beginning. So grief is like that. You have to allow each person whatever fear that they need. So it took me some time. Again?
Thank you so much.
Okay,
This
sure.
was really beyond touching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're good? Was there another question? I'm sorry. I just don't want to hold everybody hostage. This hot soup.
First of all, thank you so much.
Sure.
I am wondering, right now, like you said, we're really all hurting, and that
Yeah.
shows actually that we're one heart, one people, because these hostages, I don't know any of them, I don't think, even though I'm from Israel and my family is from there, but I'm just so drawn and hurt, and I don't see exactly where, I'm saying the Tehillim and everything, but I'm still feeling like, what am I
What's the point?
not what's the point, but what else can I do? I can't drill a tunnel under Gaza to find them,
You don't need to. This is really so clearly, if you look at what's going on in the world, how little sense it makes that we were attacked and suddenly there's rallies that are, against. It just makes no sense where all this hatred suddenly popped up from now. It's so, when you look at that, you recognize really, really, we're all being asked to do. We do whatever good we can do. At every moment of the day, we ask ourselves, how can I use this moment well? If we're already davening, if we're not davening, if we're not praying a lot, start to pray. If you're praying already, pray better. If you're not giving, give. If you're giving, give more. Like with every mitzvah, if you're not doing one, take something on, light a candle. Ask someone else to. Well, those of us that have been lighting candles for many years, when we light, think about it as, Hashem, this is my way of bringing light to the world. Add a fervent prayer. Mashiach is going to come. This is the pangs of Mashiach. So what's going to bring it? Yes, the IDF and the tanks and all the Iron Dome. Very important. It is. It really, really is. But there's also such a strong spiritual dimension. The problem is we don't see it in measurable ways. We're looking at it from physical eyes. You can't measure spirituality.
Yeah.
So we get the sense of, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. But the Rebbe always told us what to do.
And I have that list, but it's
From the moment you wake up, do everything.
But then I get overwhelmed. But I think a lot of women share that too.
Yeah, so do it a tiny bit at a time. But I'm saying there's no shortage of what to do. I'm not saying that we have to turn into, machines. Even the soldiers take breaks. But what I'm saying is the question of how to make this better from a spiritual point of view, we know. We know the mitzvahs. And there's one other little dimension, which is each of us has like a particular role. How do we know what it is? So the Rebbe says in the Sikha, that which is hardest for us. Many times it's like some people give very generously, other people it's very difficult to give. We have that mitzvah that's hard for us. I know what mine is, Put some effort there. put some effort there. And if it's a little bit uncomfortable, we think about the hostages and the soldiers, and we push ourselves just a little bit more. And we just give a little bit more. We push a little bit harder. This would be the time now. It's really the time.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
What?
I think we all are going home with lots to think about, lots of things that we can bring practically into our lives. We are planning in Rosh Hashem for one of our upcoming book clubs to be her book, which is called Even If I'm Not. And we hope that the next time we are all together, it will be for a celebration of the coming of Mashiach.